I was 11 the summer my father left. Not dramatically, no shouted arguments. He just stopped coming home one Tuesday, and by Friday his side of the closet was empty. My mother cried for 3 weeks straight, then put on her scrubs, went back to her nursing shifts, and never mentioned him again. That's how I became a latchkey kid. Every weekday from 3:15 to 6:30, the house was mine. Mom left detailed notes on the refrigerator. Snack in the blue container, homework before TV, lock the deadbolt. I followed those rules religiously, not because I was a particularly obedient child, but because the house felt different when she wasn't in it, bigger, like the rooms were breathing differently. I never told her that. She had enough to carry. It was an October afternoon when it started, the kind where the sky turns that particular shade of bruised yellow before rain. I dropped my backpack by the door, locked the deadbolt, checked it twice, then kicked off my shoes and padded into the kitchen for a snack. That's when I noticed the back window. It was open 2 inches. I stood there staring at it for a long moment, my hand still inside the bag of crackers. Mom never opened that window. It faced the narrow side yard, a concrete strip between our house and the fence, barely wide enough for a person to walk through sideways. She called it the dead zone. Nothing grew there. The light never reached it. Wind, I told myself. Old houses do weird things. I closed and latched it. I ate my snack. I did half of my math homework. I turned on the TV, pulling my knees to my chest on the couch, the way I always did when the house felt too quiet. Then I heard the footsteps. Not downstairs, above me. Our house had only 1 floor. Above me was the attic, a low, unfinished space that my mother used for holiday decorations and nothing else. The pull cord for the attic hatch was in the hallway ceiling. The attic itself required a step stool to reach. I sat completely still, crackers frozen halfway to my mouth. Thump, thump, slow, deliberate. I told myself it was squirrels. We'd had a squirrel problem 2 years earlier. My dad had spent an entire Saturday sealing gaps in the roofline. I clung to that memory. Squirrels, just squirrels. Then I heard the breathing. It was coming from the hallway vent, one of those old-fashioned iron grates set low in the baseboard. The attic connected to the ductwork up there, and sound traveled in it in strange ways sometimes. Mom had told me that once when I was scared of hearing pipes. But this wasn't pipes. It was a long, slow, conscious exhale, like someone trying to be quiet and failing. Like someone who had been still for a very long time and couldn't hold still any longer. My body made a decision before my brain caught up. I slid off the couch, pressed my back against the wall beside the vent, and listened with every nerve I had. Silence. Then, very softly, 2 words floated through the grate in a voice that was almost a whisper. I'm hungry. I don't remember crossing the living room. I don't remember unlocking the front door with fingers that had gone completely numb. What I remember is the cold October air hitting my face, and then I was on the front lawn, barefoot on the wet grass, staring back at the house. My mother's house, my house. Every window looked normal. Every curtain hung perfectly still. For a moment, one terrible, hopeful moment, I convinced myself I had imagined it. Then the curtain in the hallway window moved. Someone was watching me from inside. I ran to Mrs. O'Coffer next door, and she let me in without asking questions. She saw my face and simply opened her arms. I called my mother from her kitchen phone, voice completely flat because I had gone somewhere past crying, past fear, into that strange gray place where your body is just waiting for the adults to arrive and fix what broke. Mom called the police before she even left the hospital. They found him in the attic. He was a man in his late 40s, thin in the way that meant he hadn't eaten properly in weeks. He'd been living up there for at least 4 days, the officers said. Long enough to learn our routine, long enough to know that the window latch in the back could be coaxed open from outside with a flathead screwdriver. Long enough to know that from 3:15 to 6:30, only a child came home. He wasn't charged with anything serious, trespassing, breaking and entering. He was mentally ill, the detectives told my mother with quiet, practiced sympathy. Not dangerous, unlikely to reoffend. My mother nodded at the right moments and thanked them when they left. Then she sat down next to me on the couch, pulled me to her side, and held on. She never went back to the evening shift. I'm 31 now. I own a house. I lock every window before bed, even in summer, even on the warmest nights when the air sits heavy and still. And sometimes, when the house is quiet and the light is failing and I'm alone with just the sound of my own breathing, I check the hallway vent every single time. My sister and her husband had just bought a 4-bedroom colonial about 40 minutes outside the city. Nothing fancy, but solid. Original hardwood floors, old windows that rattled in the wind. The kind of house that makes noise in a way you eventually stop noticing. They asked me to house sit for a long weekend while they took their kids to their in-laws down in Virginia. I didn't mind. I was in between apartments and my current sublet was miserable. 4 days of space, a real kitchen, a backyard. I jumped at it. The first 2 nights were fine. I cooked, watched movies on their big TV, slept in the guest room upstairs at the end of the hall. The 3rd night is what I need to tell you about. I was in the kitchen around 10:30 making tea before bed when I heard the basement door shift. Not slam, not creak, just a low, deliberate shift, like someone had leaned their weight against the other side of it. I stood at the counter and listened. The house went quiet again. I told myself the old door warped sometimes, that houses expand and contract at night. I finished my tea and went upstairs. I was in bed reading when I heard footsteps. Not overhead. This wasn't the attic or the roof settling. These were deliberate, slow, on the first floor, moving from the direction of the kitchen toward the staircase. 1 step, then a pause, then another. I sat completely still, the book still open in my lap, and counted the steps in my head as they crossed the hardwood. I knew that floor. I'd walked it for 3 days. Whoever or whatever it was passed the bottom of the staircase and stopped. I heard nothing for almost a full minute. Then the first stare. I was off the bed before I knew I'd moved. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and quietly locked the guest room door. It was a flimsy push-button lock, the kind a child could open with a coin, and backed against the far wall. I didn't turn on the light. I stood in the dark, phone in hand, and listened. The footsteps stopped somewhere between the 1st and 2nd floor landing. Then nothing. I stayed against that wall for what felt like a long time, long enough that I started to wonder if I was losing it, if I'd imagined the whole thing, if the house had just done what old houses do and I'd let my brain turn nothing into something terrifying. I had almost convinced myself of that when the doorknob moved. Just a quarter turn, testing it. Whoever was on the other side knew it was locked and didn't push it or pull at it or make a sound. They just tried it, felt the resistance, and stopped. I called 911. I whispered everything: the basement door, the footsteps, the knob, and the dispatcher stayed on with me. She asked if I had a way out. The guest room window overlooked the side yard from the second floor, maybe 12 feet down. Not ideal, but manageable. I stayed on the line. 7 minutes later, the dispatcher said officers were outside. She told me to stay in the room until they called up to me. They did. I heard my name and a badge number through the door. I unlocked it, and 2 officers were standing in the hallway, which was empty. We cleared the upstairs first, then went down. One officer checked the basement, while the other stayed with me in the kitchen. A minute passed, then I heard the first officer call up. There was a man in the basement. He was sitting on the floor in the utility room behind the water heater, knees pulled up, back against the wall. He didn't run or fight. He was young, early 20s maybe, thin, dressed in dirty clothes, wearing a single sneaker. He smelled like he hadn't slept inside in a while. He told the officers his name. He said he'd found the basement window unlatched 3 days earlier, the first night I was there. He'd been sleeping down there, slipping in and out during the day while I was out, using the half bathroom next to the furnace. He said he hadn't meant to frighten anyone. He hadn't realized someone was staying in the house. He'd heard me moving around and tried to wait me out. He was charged with trespassing and taken out in handcuffs. He didn't fight it. He just looked exhausted. I sat in the kitchen for an hour after the police left. The officers had walked the whole house twice, every window, every closet. Nothing else was disturbed. My sister's jewelry was untouched. The kids' rooms were untouched. Nothing was taken. I called my sister at midnight and told her everything. She cried, not because she was angry, because her kids had been in that house 2 weekends before, and none of us had thought to check the basement windows. I left a lamp on in every room and slept with the guest room door locked and a kitchen chair wedged under the handle. I barely slept at all. They had the window repaired before they came back. They also had the basement lock rekeyed and bought a security system. All things they probably should have done when they moved in, but you never think you need to until you do. I still think about the footsteps stopping on the landing, how long he must have stood there, listening, deciding. And I think about the doorknob, that single quiet quarter turn, and what it would have taken for it to go differently. Not much is the honest answer. Not much at all. My name is Claire, and I was 22 when I took a babysitting job that I still can't talk about without my hands shaking. It was supposed to be easy money. A couple in the next town over, the Hendersons, needed someone to watch their 7-year-old son Milo while they attended a weekend wedding 3 hours away. 2 nights, good pay, and a house I'd never been to before. I should have known something was off when Mrs. Henderson handed me the keys and wouldn't quite meet my eyes. The house sat at the end of a long gravel driveway, surrounded by trees on every side. No neighbors close enough to see, which the realtor in me would have called secluded charm, and the rest of me should have called a warning sign. Milo was a sweet kid, quiet, drew dinosaurs in a notebook he carried everywhere. The first night went fine. We made macaroni, watched a movie, and he fell asleep around 9. I figured I'd have a peaceful weekend.
The second night was different from the start. Around 10, after Milo was in bed, I heard something scratching at the basement door, just off the kitchen. I told myself it was the house settling, or maybe a raccoon that had gotten into the crawl space. I put on a true crime podcast to drown it out, which in hindsight was a poor decision given what was about to happen to me. Around 11, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. A woman's voice, breathless, asked if Milo was awake. I said no, he was asleep, and asked who this was. She said her name was Diane, and that she used to work for the Hendersons. Then she asked me a question that turned my stomach to ice. Has anyone checked the basement since you got there? I told her I hadn't been down there at all. She went quiet for a second, then said very calmly that I needed to get Milo and leave the house immediately, that I shouldn't go check, that I should just get him and go. I asked her why, and she said only this: because there's a reason they never use that door, and it isn't raccoons. Then the call dropped. My first instinct was that this was a prank, maybe a cruel joke from someone who knew the family, but the scratching at the basement door hadn't stopped, and now it had turned into something heavier, like a shoulder leaning against the wood from the other side. I crept upstairs to get Milo. He was already awake, sitting in bed, staring at his closed bedroom door. "Someone's in the house," he whispered before I could say anything. "He comes up sometimes. Mom and Dad lock the basement door with the deadbolt every night before they go to sleep. I'm not supposed to tell." I felt my whole body go cold. I asked him who he was, and Milo just shook his head and said, "The man who used to live here. He doesn't like new people in his house." I didn't wait for more of an explanation. I grabbed Milo's hand, his shoes, and my phone, and we headed for the front door. That was when the lights went out, every single one, all at once, like someone had thrown a master switch. In the dark, I heard the basement door give way with a crack of splintering wood, followed by slow, uneven footsteps coming up into the kitchen. I pulled Milo toward the front door, fumbling with the deadbolt, my fingers numb with adrenaline. Behind us, the footsteps stopped just at the edge of the kitchen, like whoever it was could see perfectly fine in the dark and was simply deciding what to do next. I finally got the door open, and we ran. We didn't stop until we reached the end of the driveway, where, thank God, a car was just turning in. It was Diane, the woman who had called me. She'd driven over the moment we hung up. She got us both into her car, locked the doors, and called the police while we sat there shaking in the back seat, watching the dark house at the end of the driveway. When the police arrived, they searched the house and the basement. What they found down there was a small room behind a false wall, fitted out like someone had been living in it for a long time. A mattress, food wrappers, and a hole drilled through the wall at eye level into Milo's bedroom closet. They never found the man, only a tunnel dug out beneath the foundation, leading to the woods behind the property. Diane later told me she used to babysit for the Hendersons years before me, and one night she'd woken up to find that same basement door wide open and a man standing at the foot of the stairs, just watching her. She ran and never went back, and she'd kept an eye on the house number ever since, terrified that someday another sitter would pick up where she left off. The Hendersons never explained why they hadn't warned me, only that they didn't think it was still a problem. Milo and his parents moved out of state within the month. I still babysit sometimes, but I always check the locks twice now, and I never, ever ignore a call from a number I don't know.